Good evening, everyone. Let me first introduce myself. I'm Ramiro Salazar. I'm the director of the San Antonio Public Library System. I'm very excited to be here this evening. I feel privileged to be part of a program that we're going to present to you, a very special program. When I first learned about this particular individual that you'll soon meet, I've indicated, this story needs to be told. And that's one of the reasons we brought it downtown, to have more space for more people to attend and to hear the story. And our special guest will be appropriately introduced very shortly. But I do want to acknowledge several individuals that played an important role in bringing a special program today. I'm going to start with Joe Banglin, who is our branch services coordinator and who leads the diversity committee in developing programs for the library and for the community to raise awareness about the value and the importance of having a diverse community and appreciating a diverse community. And so they work very hard as a committee to develop programs to offer throughout the library system. We have 28 library locations, so we have a large footprint in the community. I also want to recognize Sherry Harden, who is the branch manager for the Westfall Branch Library, for being instrumental in, thank you, Sherry, and inviting and actually making happen that we're able to provide this and introduce this individual to you, very special individual to you very shortly. So I want to acknowledge them. And two, I also want to acknowledge Charlotte Ann Lucas, who is the head of NOWCast, and this program will be broadcast throughout the community thanks to NOWCast. So thanks, Charlotte Ann, for your continued support. I know you were with us this morning when we introduced the Teen Center upstairs on the 3rd floor. And by the way, the Central Library, we're celebrating 20 years when it first opened. And so what a wonderful way to mark that anniversary by hosting this program. So today, this evening, you will be hearing an incredible story of an individual with incredible fortitude, determination. It's just a wonderful story that needs to be told, as I indicated earlier. And to help me to formally introduce to you our special guest, I want to introduce to you Colonel Ruben Saigon with the United States Air Force. Colonel, we're so happy that you're here to formally introduce our very special guest. Colonel.
Thank you, Director. Before we get going, some housekeeping notes. I'd ask that you all please silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate. For those of you in need of facilities, bathrooms are directly to the left as you exit this room. And in case of emergency, please exit directly from the back out the doors towards the rear. And most importantly, after you hear the wonderful talk tonight, the books that Ambassador has available are at the back of the room to my right. So they'll be available at the end of this evening as well. So good evening, and thank you for coming to the celebration of Asian Pacific Heritage Month. It gives me great pleasure as an Asian American to introduce former Ambassador to the United Nations, Sichan Siv, who now calls San Antonio home. Former Ambassador Siv is the international best-selling author of Golden Bones, an extraordinary journey from hell in Cambodia to a new life in America, and the poetry book, Golden Words. In 2001, after unanimous confirmation by the Senate, he was appointed by President George W. Bush as an ambassador to the UN, serving until 2006. In June 2005, Ambassador Siv represented the United States at the 60th anniversary of the UN in the footsteps of President Truman in 1945, President Eisenhower in 1955, President Johnson in 1965, and President Clinton in 1995. From 1989 to 1993, Ambassador Siv served at the White House as Deputy Assistant to President George H.W. Bush and at the State Department as Deputy Assistant Secretary. In the private sector, he has held positions in social services, educational exchange, financial management, and investment banking. Ambassador Siv holds a Master of International Affairs from Columbia University. He escaped Cambodia's killing fields in 1976 and was resettled as a refugee in Connecticut with his mother's scarf, an empty rice bag, and $2. He is the recipient of numerous awards and honors, including the George H.W. Bush Award for Outstanding Public Service, the U.S. Army Commander's Award, and Brazilian Academy of Art, Culture, and History honors. He has been a volunteer in the Civil Air Patrol and an honorary commander in the United States Air Force. Today, former Ambassador Siv is widely recognized in the community as being a leader who provides global strategic advice and gives motivational speeches around the United States and the world. We are very fortunate to have him here today to share his inspirational story with us. By sharing his incredible journey with us this evening, he is allowing us an insight into the lives of those who came before us and shaped our present. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Sichan Siv.
Thank you very much, Colonel, for the kind introduction. And thank you, Ramiro and the Public Library of San Antonio for hosting this event. There's an old saying in Oklahoma that behind a good man, there's a great Texan woman who happened to be a librarian, my wife, Martha. Somebody named George W. Bush is also married to a librarian, and we both agree that we married up. I want to take you on a little journey back in time and in space to celebrate this particular Heritage Month of Asian American and Pacific ancestry. If I can make this work, does this work, Andy? Anyway, we are here to celebrate Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, which was actually proclaimed by President George H.W. Bush, my former boss, in May 1990. He extended the weekly celebration from 1 week to 1 month, and since then it has been in celebration. Can I control from here? You made it very wonderful. That's great. So as was mentioned in the intro, I was born in Cambodia, which will take us about 22 hours to fly from San Antonio to this airport. I was born less than a mile from this airport. So when you go to Phnom Penh, the capital, you land at my village. Cambodia was under the French rule when I was born, so we grew up speaking French, eating French food, which was not a bad idea. And until 1953, when the Vice President Mrs. Nixon came to visit, then our teachers told us that there was another country, much bigger and farther away than France, called United States of America. As you can see, it's quite a long way from Texas. And if Cambodia were in the United States, it would be the size of Missouri. My father died when I was 9 years old. So my mother, knowing that education was important, worked very hard to bring me up. At one point, she had to sell lotus leaves used in poor countries in the 50s, like Cambodia, to wrap produce that people bought in the markets every morning. She told me to never give up hope, no matter what happens. So that was instilled in me since I was a child. Since we didn't have anything except books, I spent a lot of time in the library. The National Library of Cambodia was founded in 1924, actually on Christmas Eve. There's Martha and I presenting a bones to the librarian in front of the inscription, which has been used as an epigraph of the book. The inscription up there was in Khmer and also in French. And it read, "Force ties for a time, ideas bind forever." And we decided to use this inscription of the National Library of Cambodia as the epigraph of Golden Bones. A few years ago, when Martha and I were in Colombia, Bogota, thanks to the foreign minister of Colombia, she had the book translated into Spanish. They used inscription as the background of my presentation. And as you can read, the same, La fuerza ata por un tiempo, las ideas unen para siempre, force ties for times, ideas bind forever. In 1969, I became a flight attendant. I flew on this French-built aircraft called the Caravelle, which looked like a DC-9. It was the first mid-range jet built, and it was used all over Europe, in Africa, and also in former French colony. I flew all over Asia. I went to China, and I was quite amazed, or in a way, incomprehensibly, to see what happened in China at the peak of the Cultural Revolution. One of my claims to fame is that I've been to China 3 years before Nixon and Kissinger. What I saw there was unbelievable, and I never thought for a moment that that revolution would reach my homeland. Cambodia was involved in the Vietnam War. The Cambodians were fighting against the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese first, and then against the Khmer Rouge. On April 10, 1975, President Ford gave an address to the joint session of Congress. He said, for this administration, the time is short, and the options are few as far as Cambodia and South Vietnam are concerned. 2 days later, I was told by the US Embassy to be at the embassy within 1 hour if I wanted to be airlifted out of Cambodia. I was concerned about the plight of some refugees, 3,000 refugees in a province, in a stranded province. My colleagues and I were working in dangerous circumstances to save the lives of many refugees and displaced people, those who had fled the war-torn countryside to seek safety and shelter in Phnom Penh, the capital, and all the provincial cities. So I decided to go and meet with the governor of a province, on that province. When I came to the embassy, I was told that the last helicopter had taken off 30 minutes before. So 5 days later, the Khmer Rouge came in and turned the country upside down. 2 weeks later, Saigon fell, and the Viet Cong took control of South Vietnam. I want to pause a moment because after this month, or not actually this month, but last month, April, marked the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon and Cambodia. So in a way, the end of the Vietnam War was commemorated last month. And I wanted to take the moment to pay tribute to all the veterans especially those who served in the Vietnam War, who was unfortunately not well recognized when they returned. And we want to thank them for their service, and also we want to pray for the memories of those people who lost. The Vietnam War ended on April 30th, 1935, and then the flux of refugees started to come. During that brief moment, a friend of mine who is one of my instructors was flying Navy planes to drop supplies to those refugees, especially the Vietnamese boat people who tried to escape the communist Viet Cong and North Vietnamese to seek a safer harbor in Malaysia, in Thailand. And he is one of my best pilots, and I'm happy, Jim Gibson, that you're here. Yes. Jim flew a lot of missions helping those boat people in the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Seas. So back to the 1975, when the Khmer Rouge came in, as I said a moment ago, they turned the country upside down. They killed anybody who wore glasses. That's a sign of education. They killed teachers, nurses, government officials, business people, military personnel, anybody who had not been with them during the revolution. So I threw away my glasses. I pretended to see nothing, to hear nothing, to know nothing, to speak of nothing. My mother gave me her wedding ring, her scarf, and a bag of rice. And she told me to run. No matter what happens, never give up hope. So I rode a bicycle across Cambodia for 3 weeks, using fake passes and false excuses to get through the Khmer Rouge checkpoints. I was captured near Thailand, and they tied my arms behind my back because they suspected that I was trying to cross the border, which was actually my intention. A truck driver whom I had met a few days before saved my life. He said that I was an innocent person wandering around looking for my family. For the next year, I was put in huge labor camps. The whole country was turned into a labor camp, into the killing fields. We were forced to work 18 hours a day. We were given a bowl of rancid soup a day. At night, I never knew if I would be alive the following morning. When I woke up, I said I would make it to freedom. In January 1976, they were looking for a crane operator. The crane operator would use a crane to pick up timber along the Thai border. And that would increase my chances to cross to Thailand, because most of timber were found there along the border. I never been in a crane in my life, but I raised my hand. I said I was a crane operator. So what I did at night, I burned small candles. I pulled a blanket over my head, and I began to study instructions. That fact alone would have cost me the life if I were caught reading something in English. But I risked it, because in Cambodia, under the Khmer Rouge, there were two kinds of people: those who had died and those who would die. During the subsequent trips to the border, I studied the land area, and I found out the shortest distance to Thailand was somewhere between the timber pickup point and the nearest village. And I knew exactly where to jump off the truck, but I could not jump to the left, nor to the right, because the driver would have seen me, or the Khmer Rouge soldier with an AK-47 would have seen me through the rear view. what I did, I crawled on top of the timber all the way to behind the truck, and I just dropped myself. It looks something like this. I was caught on a piece of lumber, and I was dragged for a few hundred yards before I was flung off. Then I picked myself up, and I began to run, to crawl, to walk, to swim for 3 days, having nothing to eat or to drink. I fell in a booby trap, which is a deep hole full of punching sticks, sharp bamboo sticks. They were supposed to catch the unlucky victims at the stomach or the heart. But I'm tall for a Cambodian, so the sticks hit me on my legs. I was severely wounded, but I wasn't killed. So I pulled myself out of that hole and began to limp along until I got to Thailand, where I was jailed for illegal entry. I had no paper. Later on, they realized that I was an innocent refugee, so they sent me to a refugee camp. This is the size of a soccer field. There were some 3,000 refugee families living there. It was hot, humid, filthy. Many suffered severe mental depression for sitting around all day, feeling sorry about the past and worrying about the future. So I thought I would do something to help them out. I organized English classes, which was a win-win proposal because many of them were going to go to an English-speaking country, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the UK, and the United States. So they were able to get some English, and they were able to get their minds off the worries and the sorrows. On June 4th, 1976, this is how I looked in the refugee camp. You see all the children there. They were we had nothing, no pencil, no paper, but they were so eager to learn a foreign language, English language. On June 4th, 1976, I arrived in Wallingford, Connecticut, to my host family home with my mother's scarf, an empty rice bag, and $2. I was sick and tired, exhausted, but I was full of hope. I felt I was a free man. I wanted to start my new life. I wanted to adapt to America so that America would adopt me. In French, it sounds even better. S'adapter et se faire adopter. Adapt, to be adopted. I did everything that came my way to the best of my ability. I picked apples. I ate a lot of apples, enough to last for a lifetime. Then I went to work for a fast food restaurant. I was going to be trained to be a manager, so I had to learn how to cook ice cream, to cook hamburgers, scoop ice cream. I never seen a hamburger in my life. Suddenly I was hearing rare, medium rare. I was holding the lettuce, and the trainer said, "Hold the lettuce." It took me a while to understand she didn't want me to put the lettuce on the hamburger. It's just so confusing. Then when I was at the cash register, I was even more confused to see that the dimes were smaller, but worth more than the nickels. Did you ever notice that? I said, this is so difficult. So my next stop, New York, New York. I arrived in Manhattan in a cold winter day of January 1937. I stood there on the street corner with all these yellow checker caps beside the back. Drivers wanted. So I called and they asked me to go and take a test. It's all about directions. How do you get from Yankee Stadium to the Wall of Astoria? I had no idea where these places were, much less how to get from one to another. So I just checked the boxes. At the end, I brought the sheet to the examiner. He looked at the boxes, he frowned. He looked at me from head to toe, he turned away, he sighed, and he said, "You passed." So I became a taxi driver. In 1977, you didn't need to know where you were going to drive a taxi. You need strong horn and good brakes. And I was sort of amazed that New Yorkers could also communicate in sign language. I continued to apply to a number of graduate schools. They all turned me down because I had no transcript except Columbia. They gave me a full scholarship. So I did a Master of International Affairs, and I met Martha there in New York. So New York has been a special place for us. Incidentally, I went there to drive a taxi, and I left as an ambassador. I went there sitting behind the wheel, and I left sitting at the back. In between, I met Martha, and I went to school there and have a number of jobs, including representing the United States. So it's a very special place for us. In the 80s, Martha and I were introduced to the Reagans. Somehow we got invited to the White House, but none topped this one on the right. That was July 13, 1988. It was in the Rose Garden. I was a dais guest of President Reagan and Vice President Bush. I had already volunteered in the Bush campaign because I wanted to understand how things worked. In 1976, when I arrived, there was an election between Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. And I was watching the convention on TV. I saw these people wearing funny hats, jumping up and down the chairs, screaming, shouting, and yelling. And I didn't understand what was going on. So my host family told me that these are delegates. They are going to choose two people, and we are going to elect one of them to be the next president. And then they turned to me, they said, Sichan, if you wanted to understand this country, you should get involved. So my chance to get involved was 1988. While I was standing there, the thought never crossed my mind that I would be working at the White House a few months later. When George H.W. Bush got elected, he asked me to go and work for him. That was quite unusual because there are hundreds and thousands of people who volunteered in the Bush campaign, not the Bush campaign, but in the presidential campaign. And I happened to be among the lucky few. I walked into work at the White House on February the 13th, 1989, which is exactly 13 years from the day I jumped off that truck in northwestern Cambodia. 13 years to the day. So there is no other place on earth where somebody could run from the killing fields to working for the top person of the country of adoption in 13 years. Only in America. Under Bush, the world changed. The Cold War ended. Eastern Europe became free. Berlin Wall came down. Soviet Union became fell apart. And there I was, sitting at the White House, seeing history taking shape in front of my eyes. It was quite overwhelming. One of the words of wisdom that we remembered very well was this, when George Bush said on June 22nd, 1989, that any definition of a successful life must include serving others. After I heard that, I went to join the Civil Air Patrol, where Jim and I are now members, and we have been doing a lot of good work to protect the American people. We have aerospace education, we have cadet programs, we have the emergency services, and now we are going into Homeland Security. And Jim and I have been flying together quite a bit. So any definition of a successful life must include serving others. He signed a lot of proclamations, and one that was a landmark to us who are Americans of Asian and Pacific ancestry is this proclamation, which is, I have a copy there behind you, with a pen that he signed that proclamation. He gave me the pen, so when you leave, take a look at the proclamation. He extended, as I mentioned early on, the weekly celebration to the whole month of May. That's one of the reasons we are together tonight, to celebrate this strength of America, that is the ethnic. In 2001, George W. Bush sent me to the United Nations, which is a special place for us because we co-founded the United Nations. We play host. New York is the world's largest diplomatic community. Then we are the largest benefactor to many United Nations programs. We are right there at the top, from cradle to coffin, from children to aging, everything in between. Women, HIV/AIDS, health issue, food. We are there. We are doing this not to be popular. We are doing this because it's right, because it's our duty to honor our country, because we are Americans. America is never a conquering power. We transform the rubbles of Europe and Japan into parliaments and prosperity. We respond to earthquakes and tsunamis. We help improve health and education. We support women and children. We give voice to the voiceless. We are breeding democratic prosperity. Among the trips I have done, this probably is counted among the best or the most memorable. In 2004, I was sent to Cambodia to represent the United States at the coronation of the new king. You know, monarchs have a lifetime job. For example, the king of Cambodia, the former king, was on the throne in 1941 when FDR was at the White House. Just imagine 1941. He sent an elephant to Truman as a sign of friendship. Unfortunately, the elephant died off the coast of Cape Town in South Africa. Met everyone since then, from Eisenhower onward. So he decided to abdicate in 2004, and the United States decided to send me to Cambodia. There I was in a throne hall. There's a throne behind me. And I look around, I saw that I realized that I was the only person invited from a foreign capital. All those countries were represented by their ambassadors accredited to Cambodia. And as I watched the ritual that date back to the 10th century, I was quite overwhelmed to realize that here I was representing my country of adoption at the coronation of the king of my country of birth. I may be one of the few people in history to have experienced that, but that is because it's only in America. It has been an honor for us to work for two presidents, both Texans and both named Bush. I used to say that I worked behind the bushes. So Martha and I decided to summarize our experience into this memoir called Golden Bones, which are the terms that Cambodians use to describe somebody who is very blessed, very lucky. And I think we are all people of golden bones because we are blessed, very lucky to be Americans and to live here. After that, we came up with another book, which is a sort of a political thriller. It's what I call a fiction based on facts. It's involved Russia, China, the United States, and France. Financial world, political world, and there was a tug of war between the legislative branch and the executive branch. But it's all about love, power, and greed. Very interesting book. I because one of the principal characters is a Texan who happened to live not too far from here. So those are the countries that were involved in this book. Here at home, we like to interact with young people. As you recognize, this is the U.S. Air Force Academy. And then there's a group called City Year, which is a program for young people to spend 1 year of their lives helping underperforming students. And at the center is Paul Garrow, who used to be heading that. Paul, you want to stand up and being recognized as Paul? And of course, the Civil Air Patrol cadets, which I mentioned a moment ago, where Jim and I served with pleasure and privilege. These are the cadets of the Civil Air Patrol. And we have these Boy Scouts. This picture, if you recognize my socks, this was at the Bush Library last month. It was a program for scouts, Boy Scouts who want to earn a merit badge. And they have to interact with somebody, and I happen to be that somebody. The picture at the top is from a school here called Concordia Lutheran, which they taught students to love one another, family, community, country, and the world. So that is one of our pleasures, and I usually show this slide because young people have to learn how to ride bike. Because life, I've been telling them, is like riding a bike. You have to keep on pedaling, otherwise you fall. And that reminds me of my younger years. When I was in Cambodia, I rode my bike 10 miles 4 times a day, under 90-degree to 100-degree sun. And somehow bike saved my life because I was able to ride for 3 weeks across Cambodia trying to escape. So if you have not learned how to bike yet, you should, the children especially. BPP, I usually ask them, if you were a boat, what would you be, a speed boat or a cruise ship or an aircraft carrier? The second P is plane. If you were a plane, would you be a jet fighter or a cargo plane? A C-5 or a Boeing 747. And then last P, if you were a person, have you ever thought what kind of person you are? A beach person or a mountain person? Those are children, they like that kind of thing as they start thinking about all of this. Then you have a family, you go to college, you work hard to bring up a family, and suddenly you're 90 years old. What do you do when you're 90 years old? You jump off the plane, like George H.W. Bush, or this gentleman on the right, who I met just last month at the Senior Games, that my friend Lee Porish took me. I was a volunteer in the swimming lane, and he came to me. I looked at the chart. I said, "Are you Baker Shannon?" He said, "Yes." He's 90 years old, and he won. He's in a class by himself. So that was a week before the Bush Library events. When I asked him, "You want to come to the Bush Library? Have you been there?" He said, "Yes. In fact, I'm an Aggie. I'm a 1946 graduate of Aggie." So he came. He drove from Houston to College Station, and he brought his Eagle Scout medal from 1939. That's amazing, isn't it? But this is what George Bush said. Just because you're an old guy, you don't have to sit around drooling in the corner. Go out and do something. Get out and enjoy life. So I take a lot of inspiration from him. I haven't gone up the sky and dive yet, but it's on my list. And last but not least, this is what I usually leave with the young people. Be well, be wise, be worthy. Be flexible and able to adapt to difficult circumstances. Follow your passion. when you do well, don't forget to do good. Thank you very much. God bless you and God bless America. I'll be happy to take any questions. Yes?
Where did you cross into Thailand?
I crossed the western part of Cambodia, which is the eastern part of Thailand, in a village, across a village called Thap Phaya in Prachinburi province. And when I arrived in Thailand, after 3 years of crossing, I was put in a police cell. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I don't know how to use it, but I try. Okay, and they put me in a police cell until the following day, then they took me to a prison, put me in prison. And some years ago, Martha and I went to see that police cell. It's still there, and we also went to see the prison. Yeah. Bobby?
When?
Was it 19?
When you crossed the
When? Did you ask when or where?
When?
Where, yes.
When?
Oh, he said where.
Where?
You said ask when or where?
Where?
Where, yes, where, okay.
No,
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
Yeah, you been to Thailand?
Yes, I have.
Oh, do you live there?
No, I've never.
Yeah, it's a beautiful country. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I was so fascinated with you, you're saying that you, under the blanket, studied a manual for the, where did you get a manual? It's one like you had.
I said something happened for a reason. They put all the, when the Khmer Rouge came to power in this part of the country, they put all the heavy engine, the equipment in the form of school. And somehow the old manuals of the locking truck were just lying on the ground, and I picked it up, and it was in English. And of course I had to hide it because reading is already a crime, and reading English is
So
even...
how did you read without your glasses?
I don't read with my glasses.
You don't need them?
No. It's driving that I do. That's why I had an accident when I was driving a truck under the Khmer Rouge. I told them I was a truck driver, so they put me behind the wheel and I drove the truck. I couldn't see anything. And one point I was driving a loader, the one that carried stuff and you unload it. Yeah, and my shift was from midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was a rainy day, and you know in Southeast Asia when it rains, it just rains very heavily. And I back up to unload the soil. They were building a road, and I couldn't see, so the back wheel of the truck fell off the road, and the heavy load pulled the truck to collapse on the side, and the windshield was broken. I was cut all over, blood all over my body. I crawled out of that truck, and suddenly the Khmer Rouge arrived on that spot, and he said, "What happened?" And I know that I was going to be killed because that I damaged state property, and damaged state property carried death sentence. But the same truck driver saved my life the second time. He said that the damage is very minor. It takes only a few moments to fix it. So I was saved by the same guy.
He wasn't telling the truth, was he?
Pardon me?
About the damage, he wasn't telling the truth.
He wasn't telling the truth. He somehow I knew that he knew I was not the person I was telling him, but he didn't ask the question, and I did not volunteer the answer. Yeah. So sometime in your life, you feel that somebody just show up to help. I think in my life that would be him, would be the truck driver. Yeah. Yes.
How difficult was it to get your mother out?
I did not get my mother out. Yeah, she was killed along with my sister, my brother, and their children, 15 of them. And if you go to my website, sichansiv.com, there was an article I wrote in the New York Times called Last Breakfast in Cambodia. That's I describe the final days of the war in Cambodia, and of the 16 people who left that day when the Khmer Rouge came in, I'm the only survivor. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, not only in the travel channel, they are making interviews around the world, and they make an interview in Cambodia last month,
Yes.
and they have a goal to sit in a table
Yeah.
with the bodies. And
Yeah.
in this table, there were one of the Khmer Rouge,
Yeah.
Central Committee Khmer Rouge,
Mm.
and one of the members of the body that is ruling Cambodia right now,
Yeah.
a victim of the Khmer Rouge, and they killed all their family,
Yes.
and a person who represents the opposition
Yeah.
in Cambodia right now. The last time we were in Cambodia was in 2009,
A few years ago.
a few years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you see the situation in Cambodia right now regarding the genocide?
You all hear the question?
Yes.
Okay, well, what is the situation now regarding the genocide? The United Nations decided to set up a tribunal to bring these people who have committed what they call the crime against humanity. I was, at that time, I was ambassador to the UN. My personal position coincided with the US position. We were encouraged by our friends, the Japanese, the French, Australian, to help the tribunal. So we agreed along. We decided to go along. But these tribunals took so long to be established and spent a lot of money. And they only had a mandate to bring about 5 or 6 people to trial. $160 million to bring 4 or 5 people to trial. And the first verdict was for a guy who ran a concentration camp that resulted in about 25,000 people, 25,000 deaths. The first sentence was for 19 years. I mean, if you are responsible for 25,000 people, the only sentence that matched that crime is death sentence. It's just the crime is right here and the verdict is here. It was like the wrist, a slap on the wrist. From that time, I felt very disappointed. A lot of people felt that they were betrayed by the sentence, and I felt that this tribunal has become a symbol of injustice, of impunity. How many schools, how many hospitals, how many libraries can you build in Cambodia with $160 million? And here they spend $160 million to try to bring some of these people who are in their 80s to so-called justice. It turned out to be a complete justice. So I had no trust in this tribunal, unfortunately. And Cambodia doesn't have a death penalty. So the maximum sentence was a life sentence. They later converted that sentence to a life sentence for this guy. But it's still, you know, if you kill my mother, my sister, my brother, my friends, my neighbors, and 2 million of my people, the only sentence that matches that kind of crime is death sentence. Yeah. And other questions? Yes, how are we?
Sometimes when people do very bad things to you and to your family, and then there's a few people that, in your case, save your life, you can go either way in how you view the rest of humanity, the rest of your life. Can you talk a little bit, other than, your mom saying to never give up hope, how you ended up taking such a positive route in your life, to help others, and then also to still believe in mankind and the goodness of people when you have so many people that did bad things to your family?
Well, we all want to forgive and we don't want to forget, just like what happened in the Holocaust and genocide. By the way, Harry, as I mentioned to you, I'm a member of the Texas State Commission on Holocaust and Genocide, and our mission is to educate people about the danger of this. And I always remember what Einstein said, that the world is dangerous a place to live, not because bad people are doing bad things, but because good people let it happen. So we want everybody to be upstanders instead of bystanders. Positive attitude is very important. It happened already. It's too bad that it happened to me, to my family, but I wanted to transform this around, to turn this around, so that people can benefit from it. That's why it took us so long to write that book, Golden Bones, because I don't want to go back and visit all these painful memories. It took us 30 years. The minute I arrived in Connecticut, each time I was introduced myself, people asked me, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? And I said, no, I have no plan. And a friend of ours began to sort of encourage me to try to go over these painful memories so that the rest of the people can benefit from it. So she encouraged me to speak and to write. And the first time I spoke was at a church in New Jersey, a Lutheran church in New Jersey, and I was so nervous that I didn't know what I was saying. At the end, I remember I said, I'm very happy to be here, and I thank America for giving me a place to start my new life. And the pastor came and gave me a big hug, and I got a standing ovation, so I must have said something right. But, and then after a number of practice, especially after I was at the White House, when I spoke on behalf of the President and at the United Nations, when I spoke on behalf of the United States, and I became more and more comfortable. Yeah. But it's important to share the experience. I encourage people to share their stories. Each of us has a story to tell. Yeah, yeah.
Do you come from a particular religious background or heritage, and did it impact the rest of your life?
Yes, I was brought up in.
Moving through this terrible time.
Yeah, I was brought up in a Buddhist family because Cambodia, just like Thailand and Burma and Laos and many countries in the southern part of Asia, we are Buddhists. About 90% of people are Buddhists. So my mother was a devout Buddhist, and that's what she taught me how to do good things, to forgive but not forget. And but I'm married to a Presbyterian. And when I came to America through a Catholic agency. And I found a job through the Jewish organizations. And I worked for the Lutheran Church and the Episcopal Church, so I am very ecumenical. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Any other? Yes, yes, sir.
Why did you choose to live here in San Antonio?
Good question. Yeah, I should mention that Martha is from a small town in the Panhandle called Pampa. Have you heard of Pampa? Pampa. Oh, wonderful. Pampa is about 60 miles northeast of Amarillo. And they say that it's closer to 5 other state capitals than to Austin. I can count Lincoln, Nebraska, Topeka, Kansas, Oklahoma City, Santa Fe, and what is the last one? Denver, right? Yeah, 5, yeah. There's nothing between Pampa and the North Pole, except a barbed wire fence and 2 strands are down. So Martha was a valedictorian of her high school, and in fact, when she was inducted to the High School Hall of Fame, we went to Pampa and we were in this homecoming parade, and we rode in a 1966 Plymouth, convertible, 1966 Plymouth. So that was, and the owner drove the car himself, so it was quite a big deal. So after Pampa High School, she went to UT and then to Washington, to Paris and Bangkok. Working for the United Nations, as I mentioned, we met in New York. So we've been in New York since 1977. And when Martha decided to leave the World Bank, we decided to come back home. We looked at Austin and at Dallas and Houston. Of course, Pampa is a little bit too remote for us. And she's only child and we have no living relatives. And we chose San Antonio because we love the military. This is a big military city, USA. Good medical facilities, a lot of history, a lot of museums. And the tiebreaker was the airport. It's so easy to get in and out. When you arrive at the airport, you arrive at the terminal. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much.